Welcome to the New Orleans Saints podcast, presented by Rouse's Markets. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL daily. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome to the New Orleans Saints podcast, presented by Rouse's Markets. I'm Erin Summers alongside Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, where you can actually watch that every week, every day on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. So we love having you. I guess you're kind of part of the family.
I love to be a part of the family.
Right?
It's great. Thank you for having me.
We're here to talk about the Saints' second game of the year against the 49ers. Unfortunately, starting the season 0-2, but two games that they were in and had opportunity to win at the end of the game as well. So let's break it down. It was 26-21 final. What do you think the main component, and I think even head coach Kellen Moore mentioned this a little while ago, like just the way that they started the game probably wasn't as fast as they wanted to. But what do you think the main component of what ended up being the loss was for the Saints?
Yeah, I think the slow start contributes for certain. I mean, to be fair, they had an opportunity in the end zone too, and it was just a misconnection between Spencer Rattler and Chris Olave on that potential touchdown pass that could have really started things off a little bit faster. So you kind of wonder like the what if of that situation. But after that, I think some of the big things that contributed early were, early penalties. Saints still had 7 penalties in this game, which is better than the 13 that they had week 1. So certainly an improvement, but some of the penalties were still kind of ill-timed. I think, head coach Kellen Moore talked about that a little bit, third down penalties, situational football, things like that. But there were at least 2 third downs that were given up by penalty. And so I think some early contributions there and then some early third down struggles for the team on both sides of the football, I think probably contributed to the fact that they were playing from behind. Otherwise, I mean, they complete that pass in the end zone. We're probably talking about a very different game at that point because the momentum just kind of would have kicked off big time in front of the home audience.
The first drive, so many opportunities that were just near misses that could have definitely changed the way that game went from the very beginning, as you said.
Yeah, and that's part of the growing pains of everything being new. A new head coach, new quarterback. Or, I mean, a quarterback that had 7 games of experience, but still a new quarterback in a new system, I guess you can say. New week 1 starter, if nothing else. New defense, new defensive coordinator, new defensive play caller, new defensive system, several new pieces all over the team as well. And so sometimes the things that are going to be about timing are going to take some time to kind of massage out. And that's really what that was. Spencer Rattler throws that football before Chris Olave comes out of his break. So he's throwing to a spot on the field where he's expecting Olave to be. And it just, as using Spencer Rattler's own words, it was just a little bit to the left. Yeah. And that ended up making all the difference in that moment. It is a big what if for this game if they punch that in and then the rest of the game kind of goes as it was. That's a 4-touchdown day for Spencer Rattler, who had already had a career best day in this matchup.
Yeah, he really has handled himself extremely well.
Completely.
And I think that he settled in as the game went on a little bit more. When you look at his numbers overall, again, you mentioned career day for him. So he is building and I think improving each time that he's taking the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Career high in completion percentage with 73.5%, career high in passer rating with 118.1, career high in touchdowns with 3. He completed 14 consecutive passes at one point. That was a career high as well. 25 of 34 on the day. I mean, he had a really, really strong day. And the leaps and bounds that you've seen him take, not just from week 1 to week 2, but going all the way back to the way that things went last year, where he didn't necessarily have the greatest supporting cast around him in terms of the injuries that were going on and everything. And then you get in through the offseason where they really, really focus on situational football. They focused on third downs. They focused on the end of half 2-minute drills, end of game 2-minute drills, backed up situations, things like that. You can kind of see the preparation coming through. Now it's just about getting sort of the fine tuning part of it all down, right? And that fine tuning comes with reps. And so they're getting those reps now. And ideally you continue to see an upward trajectory for the young quarterback and for the offense and team as a whole.
Even Coach Moore is having to get a little more settled in as well. And I think the offense, you're seeing little tweaks subtly each week, even from first half to second half, the use of more play action, the tempo we've seen used differently as well. So I think he's going to continue to add things in as the season progresses. progresses and even pieces with Devon Vele getting in and getting a higher number of snaps in this past game.
Yeah, and he was out there on the field to begin the game, if I recall correctly, at least early on in the game. He was out there for the first drive, Devon Vele was, and that was after seeing only a few snaps late in the game in week 1. And that was one of the things that Coach Moore told us in one of the earlier press conferences after they acquired Vele via trade, was that his role was going to grow over the season, kind of compared it to when he was with the Eagles last year in the acquisition of Jahan Dotson, the wide receiver. Jahan Dotson, I believe, was acquired on August 20th going into that season, and Vele was around August 22nd in this season. And so both of them are going to be on very similar trajectories, except Vele's already got his first touchdown now.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right, about Moore too. He talked a lot about how even he had some things that he reflected on after that first game. And so in the second game, stayed a little bit more committed to the run game, playing sort of the mixed downs, as he called them, meaning passing downs and rushing downs. And so being able to implement both even later on into the game, and then being able to benefit off of that in play action and all the other kind of things that we call easy buttons in the NFL: motion, play action, RPO, zone reads, things like that. And so as he continues to kind of build out the foundation for the offense, and then eventually starts to build the structure of the offense on top of that, I think you're going to see more and more and more of the creativity, more and more of the innovation that he has the potential to show.
In speaking to the offense and that run game, we saw Alvin Kamara get a higher number of touches, 99 yards on the ground. Of course, goes over 100 because of his receiving yards as well. So they're continuing to use him in the passing game and then increasing his usage in the run game. And as you said, they stuck with that run game a little bit more in this one, although the game was a little bit closer. Doesn't make you have to bail on that and focus in on your passing game as much. But I do like how they used Alvin, and he's certainly still very effective.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the offensive line for their work in the run game, because they were clearing a lot of lanes for him to be able to do. And then Alvin Kamara doing the things that he typically does when he gets into that open field. He's so fluid and solid and fast and I don't mean this in a negative way, I mean this in a positive way. He doesn't look like he's doing much because it's just so easy for him when he gets into that area. So you want to open up those opportunities for him. And I think New Orleans did a good job of that. I'm not quite sure I know what a catch is after the first 2 weeks of NFL action across the entire league.
Chris Olave would agree with you because he mentioned that after the last game.
Exactly. And so, outside of that, though, I thought, when Alvin is having a game like that, it opens up the rest of your playbook. It offers you the play action late in the game. It allows you to be able to run in the red zone. That was a big part of what was successful for New Orleans on Sunday against the 49ers as well. And so just being able to kind of do all those things and utilize him as a passing threat and in the run game, it opens up so much. I think New Orleans is still very much trying to figure out who's the right complement to him to continue to mix in. Kendre Miller, Devin Neal, Velus Jones Jr., all on the roster, all have the potential to be able to show that over the course of this season. But right now, I think that's still part of what maybe a missing link is within that run game. But, I mean, when Alvin's running the way that he's running, you kind of just lean on him. You don't necessarily need somebody to come in.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need a counter option if his is always working. Looking at the defense and what they were able to do, again, Carl Granderson was flying all over the place and disrupting plays at the line. He was dropping back in coverage. He has been a fun one to watch, and I think a bright spot for this new defense.
Yeah, I remember last year there was a snap during the 2024 season where he dropped back into coverage, and he actually got a pass breakup, and I asked him about it after the game, and he said, you won't see me doing that very much. And then now in this system, he has to do it all the time. Yeah. And he looks like he's loving it. I mean, he looks like he's having a great time with it. But this new role for him, I think, is great. It's pretty akin to what he did, not necessarily at Wyoming, but before that, when he kind of played a little bit more of that stand-up outside linebacker, edge rusher. He's got 3.5 sacks over the first 2 games of the season. He had 5.5 last year. And so he's only 2 off of his 2024 pace at this point. And it doesn't look like he's going to be slowing down. And to your point, doing more than just the pass rush as well. Getting back, you have 3 tackles for a loss, I think it was, up against San Francisco. And so his ability to be able to impact not just the pass rush game, but this other part of his game where he's always been so solid and very rarely gets kind of reveled in is his ability to stop the run and his ability in the run game. He's been a lot of fun to watch so far, and in kind of his new role under defensive coordinator Brandon Staley here in the early season.
Overall, in this game, though, head coach Kellen Moore said that he would like to see a little bit more productivity from the line. Yeah. And, I mean, it was tough. Mac Jones looked like a great quarterback yesterday. Yeah. And I think it took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
So it was tough, affecting his game, and I think that's something that they're going to continue to focus on.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Last season, the Saints had a pretty good pressure percentage, which is just the number of pass rushing or opposing quarterback dropbacks that result in getting a pressure. Mm-hmm. And they had a pretty good pressure rating, but didn't have a lot of sacks to show for it. This year, so far through the first 2 games, it's the opposite. They're tied right now with, at the time that we're discussing this, with 2. They're second in the NFL with 8 sacks. They're tied for second there. But they're also 30th in the NFL with a 22.2% pressure rating and pressure percentage. And so now they've kind of flipped, right? Like when they get the pressure, they're getting home. That's good. So their pressure to sack percentage is high. But the pressure percentage and the amount of times they're actually getting into the backfield to impact that passer is a little bit low. Now, I think some of that comes from going up against a guy like Kyler Murray in the first game, where sometimes you're trying not to over pursue and you're trying to kind of hold the edge so that he can't escape and things like that. So some of that just might be about the opponent, but it is interesting to see kind of the role reversal almost of the pass rush. And I think maybe that's a little bit of where this is stemming from for Kellen Moore, who, is kind of challenging without challenging that defense and that defensive line to, aid by getting more pressure on the quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Another area that he highlighted was those third downs and their efficiency there. Didn't give up a lot of the explosive plays, the big runs and things like that, but they need to make sure that they're kind of shutting them down a little bit more when it comes to those third down situations. Yeah,
that's been really tough for them. They did a really good job forcing some long third downs in both games, not as consistently as I'm sure that they would like. Obviously, there's a high standard inside this building, but they did a good job of forcing some of those long. But the issue is that, they allowed a conversion of 3rd and 10 on a comeback by Christian McCaffrey on the right sideline. They allowed another, 10 plus yard conversion, and they had a couple of penalties that converted 3rd and longs for them where they otherwise got to stop. And those can be a little bit challenging. 53% was the conversion percentage on 3rd down for San Francisco. And the week before that with Arizona was over 40%. So there have been 12 games now since 2024 where the Saints have allowed a 3rd down conversion rate of 40% or better. They're 1-11 in those games. And so that's got to be a big key that they focus on moving ahead throughout the season over on the defensive side. When Kellen Moore talks about situational football and getting better in those situations, I think he used the phrase something along the lines of doing the things that winning teams do. That's going to be a part of that core responsibility for that defensive side, is getting off the field on 3rd downs.
Yeah. In terms of the explosive plays, there was that one, a 42-yard pass to Juwan Jennings that became obviously a big play in that game, a moment where things shifted because of an Alvin Kamara fumble, which we don't often see.
Very rare.
So the turnovers creeping up and becoming an issue in this game versus last game. I remember talking to Cam Jordan, and he said that they didn't force any turnovers. That was something that they wanted to do. They didn't have any turnovers on the offensive side either, so that's always good, but you never want to see that number not skewed in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to tie it up 0-0 in the first game and then to go 1-for-1 in the second game, and then both teams scoring off of turnovers as well in this matchup, which I think is the other thing. I completely agree with you that the Alvin Kamara fumble turning into the Juwan Jennings touchdown was a big time turning point, because it was 19-14 at that time. And then that's the touchdown that kind of helped San Francisco kind of ascend to that multi-score lead that created some issues for New Orleans, to where they needed 2 touchdowns in order to be able to really get back into the position of winning this one. And so I thought that was a really big moment in this matchup that was otherwise pretty closely fought. And so I think that's got to be another one of the big pieces that you're looking at, is obviously taking care of the football. Again, what is a catch, what is not a catch, all these other things are going to continue to be a part of that conversation. I completely understand. But in any case, even when there is a turnover, being able to go out there as a defense and getting that stop, that's something that I know guys like Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Justin Reed, the veterans on that defense, Isaac Yiadom, they all want to pride themselves in being able to do that. So that'll be another one of those big things that if they can get that cleared up, then they're not playing for a chance to win at the game. They could be holding on to a lead at that point with one more score. And so that was a big time shift in that matchup.
Yeah, and I think something else that's jumped out through 2 games is the kicking game. And the fact that Blake Grupe has missed 2 field goals is shocking to everybody who watched him throughout camp. Be extremely successful, only missing that 1 field goal when it started raining here in New Orleans. the first game, he said he rushed things a little bit. He wasn't quite as prepared. I haven't talked to him after this one, but what do you think that needs to shift to get us back in the right column there with these field goals?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is just, it's kind of like being a good shooter, right? It's kind of like being a good shooter in basketball. You need to see it go in. And so I think after he missed that first one a couple weeks ago, he was able to kind of get back into rhythm. He misses the first one against San Francisco, and then he gets back into a rhythm after that. And so I think you just need to get into that rhythm. It's part of the slow start, I think, that everybody was talking about, right? You look at that opening drive, not only did you miss on the touchdown or a missed connection on the touchdown, but there was also the miss on the field goal. And so that's a multi-score potential of missed opportunity there. And so I think it goes to the slow start conversation and just figuring out a way to kind of curb that so that you are ready to go. It's very unusual to see Blake, especially after that training camp, as you mentioned, where he only missed one field goal, and it was in that random torrential downpour where it literally only rained while he was kicking.
Exactly.
And that
for
was
like
it.
the 3 minutes that he was there. Yeah.
And so to go from that to seeing him miss now 2 field goals in 2 games, but on top of that, missing from 37 and 40 manageable situations. I think, again, we talk about high standards that they have within the building. I think those are kicks that obviously Blake wants back, but getting over that hump is going to be all about getting away from kind of whatever that slow start is that's kind of crept up on him.
It's early in the season, 2 games so far, but in general, a player or someone that has stood out to you that you've been pleasantly surprised with, impressed?
Yeah, I mean, the first name that comes to mind, just to be honest, is Carl Granderson, who we spoke about.
Yeah.
I mean, him and his early season production here. He's talked about this in the past, where he's had strong starts and strong finishes, but he's always really concerned about what he can do in the middle. And so this now is starting up an opportunity for him to be able to kind of hold that production over the course of the middle of the season. So that'll be very interesting to see. But the guy that I probably should highlight, and a big part of it is that he's not doing anything out of the ordinary. It's just the fact that he's not doing anything out of the ordinary at his age. I don't understand how Demario Davis is this good still. I mean, it's incredible to watch. Like, I consider myself very lucky that I get to watch him every week, because he's one of the best linebackers that I've watched play football, and he's still doing it. I mean, he led the team in tackles again up against the 49ers, coming in with 11 tackles. He was the one that recovered the fumble that led to a score on the opposite side. And so I want to highlight Demario and how hard and well he still plays at this point in his career, where typically you start to see a drop-off. And I mean, everybody's searching for the drop-off, but I don't think anybody's going to see it, because this guy is still playing so incredibly well.
And it's so funny. A couple of weeks ago when Teron Armstead was here, he said that they're going to have to move the facility and hide it to keep Cam Jordan from showing up every day. I think if you do that, you need to make sure that Demario Davis comes with the facility wherever it goes, so we can keep him playing.
Yeah, he's been remarkable.
Yeah, I know there's going to be growing pains, as there is when you're changing so many pieces of the coaching staff, the scheme on both sides, and putting new people in bigger roles, as in quarterback Spencer Rattler.
The thing that this team is doing very well is that they're highlighting the things that are positive, but they're not settling for them. They're understanding that progress is not a final product. And so going through and kind of tracking the way that things are improving for, how comfortable Spencer Rattler is getting, how much the offense is sort of settling in and getting a little bit more, you look at the San Francisco 49ers game versus the Arizona Cardinals game, there are some core tenets that remain true for both, but you could see a little bit more open up with San Francisco. And some of that has to do with the way that they play defense and playing a lot of these like single high safeties or at least middle of the field safeties that give you some opportunities on the perimeter. But they took advantage of those in a way that they weren't able to against Arizona. And so I think that success for the Saints this year is all about tracking progress, but making sure that progress does not create complacency and always looking for more opportunities to improve. And sometimes it's going to mean getting a look at younger guys. Sometimes that's going to mean, doing some things that might be a little bit out of the ordinary, going for it on an ill-advised 4th down every now and then or something like that. Like, we'll see these types of things throughout the season, and those growing pains will eventually turn into growth. And that's kind of the to me, at least, as I look at this team, as a critical eye is looking at it through the lens of, or a critiquing eye is looking at it through the lens of what's true for them in terms of what success actually means. And I don't know if success is always going to look like the right side of the scoreboard. Sometimes it's going to look like individual development, position development, and team development over the course of time. And I think we've already seen some of that going from week 1 to week 2.
Absolutely. That progress we're going to continue to track throughout the season, and seeing it come from throughout training camp, OTAs, everything as well. Like, you can continue to see this thing build, and looking forward to the next game, Seattle Seahawks. It's going to be a tough one.
It's a tough one, tough place to play, but it'll be a really good thing for this new unit to kind of figure out what it looks like. How do they travel together, what they do, how they prepare when it comes to that, and how they handle, of course, a really avid 12th man over there in Seattle.
Yeah, they said the speakers are going to have to be very loud at practice this week. So I'm bracing myself for that. Yeah. I appreciate you so much, Ross, for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate Ross Jackson joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. Always a great person to talk to. His insight is much appreciated. Joining me now on the Saints podcast is former Saints linebacker Keith Mitchell. He was an All-Pro in 2000, started his career here in 1997. Mitchell just wrote a book called The Mindfulness Mastery Playbook, 8 Strategies for Winning the Game of Life. After a career-ending spinal injury left Mitchell paralyzed, he faced a tough road back, but he was able to rebuild his life, regain his mobility, and this book serves as a guide for others to unlock their full potential. Keith, thank you so much for joining me on the New Orleans Saints podcast. It's always good to have a former player join us right here, talk about a little football and a little bit of life outside of the sidelines and what you're up to now. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You recently came out with a book, and one of the main reasons why we wanted to get you on here was to talk about the journey that you've had from playing to where you're at now. The book is the Mindfulness Mastery Playbook. What went into wanting to publish something?
Well, it's so interesting about that. What I learned playing football there in New Orleans and in the league period, each team has its own written philosophy about football, a common language about football, a sign language that we communicate when we can't communicate verbally. So it's so interesting when you see players get traded, and then they can play that same week. It's like it's one of those things that learned me the idea that by installing a playbook, you can help increase your execution. You can allow your development to take place. It's an opportunity to advance yourself into consciousness, and how I'm convinced that it can happen, because I see it as guys make transitions on the highest level, the National Football League, in the most competitive atmosphere. I see them do it. And so if we can do it that way, I'd imagine we can also do it in our day-to-day. So that's how I correlate that together.
What was it about your time in football and understanding the need for a playbook that really spoke to you when you went through a injury and ended up not being able to play anymore?
Well, when I came to New Orleans, it's like I was like, oh wow, I was like 21 years old. I was a kid out of college. The whole world's open up to you, and you're on this stage of the National Football League. And so, for instance, I didn't play the traditional linebacker position when I came through. And in fact, and so it's a funny story with I didn't get drafted. I was a free agent. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, I tell this story all the time. Coach Cowher called me 7th round to pick me. And I told him, because I had dropped, they were suggesting that I would go earlier in the draft. And I was so disappointed. I told Bill Cowher that he'd be better off drafting someone else. And then, interesting enough, Coach Dicker, who was the head coach of the Saints in '97, gave me a call, and he said, I don't know why you dropped and fell in the league, but in the draft, but I feel you can play for me. And so I took him up on that offer. And you talk about the playbook, because I didn't play a traditional linebacker position, it was something I had to pay attention to heavily, because I had to learn the traditional linebacker position in an intense, competitive nature of the National Football League. And so I was able to accomplish that and do some really interesting things with that. And so this is why I'm convinced about a playbook.
You were very successful while you played, all-pro linebacker, so you figured it out, regardless of not being that traditional linebacker role. And then when you had your injury, dealt with the spinal injury, being paralyzed, how did you maintain that same type of drive and work ethic to bounce back from an injury like that to be able to walk again and achieve in your post-football career?
The interesting thing about when you talk about changing and shifting ways of being, it takes a strong amount of discipline. And being a professional athlete, that's the criteria, you must have discipline. And so that discipline correlates to commitment, and commitment correlates to actually achieving your goals. And so, and putting the work in to do so. And so when I experienced that, the spinal contusion in Jacksonville, it was one of those things that I just was committed to, like, this is not the end. I have more of my life that I can do things, I can create things. And so mentally, my mind did not allow my body to check out. It's an interesting thing. It's like kind of like injuries in the league. What I realized is that you can mentally put your body in a state where you won't get injured. It's an interesting thing with Terrell Owens did that. He played with an ACL injury, an ankle sprain, and still played on an exceptional level in the NFC Championship playoff game. He showed that, and I've seen it time in with other guys as well. But the mind is a very powerful tool, and if you put it through a ringer from the standpoint of molding it, shaping it, it can allow you to do some really amazing things, like it allowed us to play on this stage of the National Football League. So I'm really convinced on that. So, yeah.
And that's something that you learned through your practice with yoga?
Yes, yoga is one of those things. I explain yoga to people. The term means union, and from the standpoint, it's like having a long conversation with and getting to know your knees, your toes, your quads, your hips, and so forth. So what you'll find is it builds capacity, and so all that you want to experience with the world is first experiencing it with yourself. I always say to go outward, you have to go in first. Mm-hmm. And so it's a gateway of just expounding upon. And what I mean by getting this conversation is actually getting to know yourself. It's getting to establish a rapport with yourself. Because a lot of times the mind, the brain is going one way and the body's going the opposite way. So it's an opportunity to get those things aligned and create a firm commitment on what you want to accomplish, achieve in that moment. And so this is why yoga is such an interesting thing, because in everything that we do, we also have to embody it. So you can't talk someone into certain levels of consciousness. It's like a playbook. And we get the playbook down in the course, in the classroom, and then we go and execute on the field. You have to embody everything that you're talking about, you want to create in your being. Mm-hmm. And so without that being established, you don't really have a ground to actually see how you can maintain and sustain it.
What does the day-to-day look like for you now?
The day-to-day with me is like checking in with yourself, checking how are you doing, and creating a space where you can actually expose yourself to yourself. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is, again, like I mentioned, the mind's going one way, the body's going another. Do you trust yourself? Does your body trust you that you would take care of it? And for so long, my body had been convinced that I've constantly put it in harm's way to the game that I was playing. I don't regret the game that I played, but it's the concepts, the fundamentals that we have to learn, that our bodies and our minds get attuned to, and it's the habits, the practices that we create in our day-to-day. So checking in with yourself and see how you're doing. And responding. I always say meditation is one of those things that you ask yourself a real question and you sit in silence to see if you told yourself the truth. Because until I can tell the truth to myself, I got nothing for anybody else. So it's a basic fundamental of growth and development that can take place in ourselves to achieve our ultimate goals ultimately. So That's my idea.
How long did it take for you to write the book?
The book was a process because, it's getting the verbiage to be able to uniquely articulate it from my perspective. I don't think you have a person really describing and articulating the psychology of sports. You talk about being in the zone. We had the saying in practice, in the league when I was in it. You think on weekdays and you react on Sundays. And how would it be if you know what to do, thought, speech, and action in your day-to-day? What can you not do? It's really what we're missing in our social settings is the resources to pull from to achieve and solve our problems. By advancing and having these tools, down relationships look different. Now business decisions, our overall decision making looks different. It's just having the resources implemented and implementation to execute. And so it's really performance. So through the process of this book and strategy, 8 strategies, winning at the game of life, I take you through the basic fundamentals of how you can build your off season to your scrimmages, like they do in the pros, as well as to your game day. And this is obviously not taking place on the football field. It's taking place in your mind and execution in your mind to follow up in your life in the day-to-day. So it's a very interesting, unique perspective, I feel, and I believe you can get something out of it.
Yeah, it definitely sounds interesting to me. And I didn't play football. I love football. I love covering it, love working here with the Saints, but I can understand the correlations for sure. What do you remember most about your time being here in New Orleans?
I really loved New Orleans, and it was a shame that maybe one day we'll unpack how I left New Orleans. But as a kid, like basically growing up to be a man there, what I remember most is the people, such great people, and how they really supported us. And when we were winning, it was on. It's like the city loved us, and I also feel that I was a part of the start of that winning tradition that you've accumulated now in New Orleans. And it was just a great opportunity to be a part of it. And I enjoyed every moment.
You're in Thailand now, so do you get to still stay in the loop as far as the NFL goes?
Well, I'm in Thailand now, but I've been living in Mexico for the last 6 years. So I've gotten accustomed to watching YouTube and seeing the highlights because a lot of it's not played, and a lot of times, like now, it's 1 o'clock in the morning when you're in your noon time. So it's kind of difficult to watch the games live. But football will always be a part of my life. My son plays it. And I'm in his corner to support him to do so. But it's one of those things. It's one of those things that I've accomplished. But I also, with other athletes, I share all the time. If football is an affirmation of things you can accomplish, now what else is possible for you? And what I've tried to do is show people what that looks like, and it's pretty fascinating. A lot of times we stop at being an athlete, but the reality is your position as an athlete can go beyond playing the game. It's leadership in your community. It's creating opportunities in your community where we can improve our social settings and so forth in whatever demographics you reside in. So that's what I'm convinced about, because we create from football so many amazing leadership. Unfortunately, what we've done in the past is we stop with football and we don't continue typically to go out into the world where we're really needed in a real game of life.
Yeah, you can use it more as an avenue and not a final stop per se. And I think you've done that a great way by sharing what you've learned and trying to correlate it to people's everyday life and what they can do to improve their life and what they're doing on a daily basis. So I'm going to have to check the book out. I know you can get it on Amazon. I'm sure it's available in bookstores as well. So congratulations on it finally being out there and published, and best of luck with everything else that you're doing.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It means so much, and I'm looking forward to coming there in December because I hadn't been back since I played, and so it's going to be kind of surreal coming back to the arena there, the Superdome, and seeing everybody and seeing the team, and things have changed, but I'm really looking forward to it because it's been so long.
It is going to be special to have so many people back here, and it's going to be great to welcome you back since it has been so long. So I look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast and sharing a little bit about your story.
Thank you so much for having me, Erin.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast presented by Rouse's Markets. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast, presented by Rouse's Markets.